All right, welcome everyone. I'm Beth Griffiths, and along with Janet Kaufman, I serve as co-director of policy programs for the Institute of Health Policy Studies here at UCSF. We're delighted to welcome you back to our Impacting Policy Skills series, and also to have Ami Alden joining us today to discuss Advocacy 101 and collaboration with UCSF Government Relations. Please make sure to enter your questions in the Q&A, and Ami is actually going to take questions somewhat as we go along. So please feel free to enter your questions as you have them, and then we'll have an opportunity at the end as well. It's my great honor to introduce Ami Alden, who is UCSF's Director of Local and State Government Relations. She supports UCSF's mission and works to improve health policy by connecting UCSF leadership, faculty, and staff with the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, the mayor's office, the state legislature, and the governor's office, as well as local and state agencies. She's responsible for planning and implementing the university's local and state government relations and advocacy efforts in San Francisco and Sacramento. Prior to coming to UCSF, Ami worked for State Assembly Budget Chair Phil Ting and for then Mayor Gavin Newsom. Ami holds a Master's of Public Policy from UC Berkeley and a BA from Georgetown University. She's originally from Santa Barbara and today lives in San Francisco with her husband and 2 children. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ami. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Beth, thank you very much. And Janet, thanks to both of you for inviting me. I'm such a huge fan of the Lee Institute, and there is a lot more work for us to do together in the future up in Sacramento. So more to come, and I look forward to a stronger partnership. I'm going to share my screen, and rather than talking more about myself at this moment, I'm going to start with a question about why should all of us at UCSF care about advocating for science? We came here to be clinicians, to be researchers, to be staff support for UCSF's mission of healthcare, education, research. Why should this advocacy and political stuff be relevant to us at all? So I always like to start with this question. Why should we spend our time on this? So exhibit number 1, why advocate for science? Here's a quote: "Climate change is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people. We keep hearing that 2014 has been the warmest year on record." And I asked the chair, do you know what this is? It's a snowball. And that's just from right outside here. So it's very, very cold out. So this is a member of the United States Senate, James Inhofe from Oklahoma, explaining why climate change is not real, because he can get an intern to scrape a snowball off the steps of the Capitol. So another example, this one is a lot more challenging, but super important given the decision that's about to happen with Roe v. Wade at the Supreme Court. Quote, "From what I understand from doctors, it's really rare. If it's a legitimate rape, the female body has ways to try to shut the whole thing down." An actual quote from a Republican member of Congress from Missouri, Todd Akin. He is explaining why rape victims can't get pregnant, because somehow the female body magically knows not to conceive if it's rape. And one more. "As a person of faith, I strongly oppose any study of evolution as fact at all. I won't support any evolution being taught as fact at all in any of our schools." And this is the chair of the state of Florida Board of Education. Crazy things about textbooks in Florida are not new. This is just from 2019, very recent. And if you imagine a high school student in Florida who someday wants to go to college and then apply to medical school at UCSF, if this is the kind of education that they've had, they're not in good shape to come study medicine. So I put these examples up as what happens when people who are uninformed about science are in a position of power to make policy in our country for women's health, for climate change, for basic research. And these are examples of why it's important that our voices be heard in the policy realm, because there's a lot of misinformation out there that we need to overcome. Now, fortunately, not all elected officials are clueless or hostile to science. And I'm very happy to put up our Speaker of the House in San Francisco, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. And she says, "As scientists, the most compelling argument is yours, because you know that of which you speak. You are essential. and your contributions give us hope. Know your power and know your responsibility. So this is Pelosi at Genentech Hall back in 2018. She was speaking at a climate change summit here in San Francisco. I've heard Nancy Pelosi speak so many times, and she always says, know your power. And, you know, the political person in me can get somewhat cynical about that. Oh, it's a know your power speech. But having her say that to a room full of UCSF scientists and clinicians and researchers was so powerful. It wasn't a compliment, it was a call to action. It was, we, the policymakers, need you, the scientists, to tell us what is happening and what we ought to do. Your voices are essential. And that's why it's important for all of us to engage in public policy and support the work of organizations like the Lee Institute, which are providing these best practices and evidence-based research to our policymakers. So what is UCSF's role in all of this? Well, to inform policymakers what is happening and educate them. Why does it matter that this thing is happening? And influence them. Well, what should we do? And to make UCSF a nonpartisan, evidence-based voice in policymaking. So how do we do that? Let's jump in. Well, number one, elected officials are the folks we're most familiar with as policymakers. There are bureaucrats and advocacy groups and others, but we're going to focus most of this presentation on elected officials. And step one, UCSF has an Office of Community and Government Relations. That's where I work. And we are the office that is the point of contact for all elected officials, local, state, federal, for our campus. And our job is to support all of you, our faculty, our staff, our clinicians, our researchers, everybody, in engaging these elected officials in the most productive way possible. And we encourage you to contact our office, me, or anybody else on our staff before meeting with elected officials or their staff in San Francisco, in the state capitol in Sacramento, or in DC, if you're there on UCSF business. Now, if you're there on your own behalf, but you would like some advice about how to interact with them, I support faculty and staff all the time that way, but it's critical to work with my office if you're going to engage them on UCSF business to make sure that we as a university have a coordinated message for what our priorities are. Excuse me. Also, please work with our office before inviting elected officials to UCSF events, either on campus or off campus. The mayor of San Francisco in particular, she gets a lot of invitations for events. She's a dynamic, very interesting figure, and we do a lot of work with the city. And so faculty and staff want to invite her to campus all the time. I occasionally get phone calls from her scheduler saying, Ami, I have 10 invitations from UCSF. What's the priority? And I always say, well, of course, the invitation from the chancellor is the priority. But if you work with me, I can help figure out whether the mayor or some other elected is the best fit for your event. And I'm always happy to help coordinate that. So if you have a policy issue that is important to you, for your patients, for your research, someplace where you think there needs to be a change made and you would like to advocate for that change, the first question is, well, who should be involved? Is this a local issue? And at the top of the screen is the San Francisco City Hall. Is it a state issue? Is this a matter of state law? Anything related to like Medi-Cal, for example, or regulation or licensure, generally state law, and there's Sacramento. Or is it a federal issue? Is this about an immigration issue for some of our faculty and staff? That's a federal issue, and of course, we'll recognize the US Capitol there. Who are your allies? Who is going to support us on this issue? What kind of coalition can we build so that it's not just UCSF or one faculty member saying this is important? Strengthen numbers. And who will oppose this? And how can you overcome that? Any elected official to whom you bring an idea is going to say, who's going to get mad at me if I work on this? And you want to be honest with them. Well, this is opposed by these various groups, but here's why you should support it anyway. What is the process used by decision makers? For example, is this a budget item? Are there deadlines for the budget process? And that's where my office can be very helpful because we're the ones that know the players, the electeds, the deadlines, the process, can help with strategy, all of that. So once you have that figured out and you're ready to meet with an elected official, you want to put yourself in the elected official's position. And here is a picture of me on the left. You may recognize next to me the governor of California, and next to him, Phil Ting, who's the chair of the Assembly Budget Committee. He also represents our UCSF Parnassus campus. Keith Yamamoto, who does precision medicine for UCSF and has a variety of leadership positions. And then Paul Takayama, who used to be my boss here at UCSF. Here we are meeting with Mr. Ting, and Governor Gavin Newsom just happened to have the meeting right after ours, and he walked in and we had our elevator pitch ready to go. We remember that when we're talking to elected officials, they are not scientists. So for example, in the state legislature, there are 120 members, and of those 120, 2 of them are doctors, and 1 of them's a dentist. Those are the only 3 out of 120 with clinical training. The rest are former city council members, members of board of supervisors, they are lawyers, they are business members, they come out of the labor community. So they're very busy, they have very limited time, a lot of competing priorities, a lot of meetings before and after yours. And you want to be sure that you're speaking to them in a language that they understand. So no medical jargon. I was in a meeting with the lieutenant governor 2 weeks ago on campus, and I'll just say a very senior member of UCSF leadership, and he was describing to her the work of our PIs, and our PIs do this and our PIs do that. And she was looking at him and squinting, and I realized she doesn't know what a PI is. And finally, she just stopped him and said, "I'm sorry, what is a PI?" And he goes, "Oh, principal investigator." And he starts to continue, and she goes, wait. What's a principal investigator? And this senior UCSF leader looked kind of puzzled and was like, "Oh, faculty, talking about faculty." So avoiding jargon, making things simple, and know your elevator pitch. What is it that you want this elected official to do? And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So the first thing that an elected official is always going to want to know from you is, why are you here? I have 10 meetings before yours. I have 5 meetings after yours. I don't have a lot of time. I could be doing 20 other things besides talking to you. So make it real simple for me to understand. And the number one thing you want to do is define the problem. What is the issue that you want them to pay attention to? So the picture here, very recent example that we're all familiar with, COVID-19. What's the problem? Well, there's a brand new respiratory virus that's airborne that is likely to sweep the globe. It is, as of March 2020, we expect it to become a pandemic. There is no vaccine and there is no cure. So why is this a problem? Well, we think this has potential to kill millions of people, up to 1 million people in the United States. Well, what do you want the legislator to do about it? And this is where you bring your solutions. This is where UCSF has provided critical health policy advice on the local level, declaring a health emergency, on the state level, streamlining the ability to get emergency funds to public health departments and public hospitals like UCSF, and streamlining regulatory requirements and graduation requirements to help us get, and licensure requirements to get public health officials out into the wards and into patient care as quickly as possible to serve patients. And why are these solutions the best solutions? Are they supported by evidence-based research, by respected UCSF research? Are they the cheapest, or are they the most cost-effective? You get the most bang for your buck. Are they the fastest? Can you get them done by the next election? Because Mayor London Breed is up for re-election next year, and every member of the state assembly is up for re-election this fall. And can you get enough votes in the legislature to pass? It may be a great idea, but let's say at the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, there are 11 members. You need a simple majority to pass anything at the board. So do some quick math in your head of what is a simple majority of 11. And if you came up with 6, you're correct. Anything you want to pass at the Board of Supervisors, you have to count to 6. And if you can't get 6 votes, no matter how great of an idea it is, it's not going to pass. So when you meet with an elected, at the end of your meeting, they're going to say to you, "Great presentation. What is it that you want me to do? How can I help?" You never, ever, ever want to say, "Well, supervisor, well, assembly member, well, congresswoman, I just wanted to share my research with you and have you hear my great ideas." Nothing will frustrate an elected official more. They are action oriented. They want to know what it is that they can do. For example, you want to have an ask like, "Please support Assembly Bill 1234, or please amend Assembly Bill 1234 to exempt UCSF medical centers because that will create a regulatory burden without adding benefit for our patients. Please support $5 million in the budget for brain tumor research. Please appoint Dr. Mark Leary to the Housing Conservatorship Advisory Board," which is an actual ask that I made to DPH. "Please call the California Department of Public Health and ask them to enforce their regulations when it comes to telehealth," another ask that I made. "Please join us for a tour of Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital," which is an ask that I made to Supervisor Shimon Walton. There he is in the picture in the middle, taking a tour of ZSFG with our former Vice Dean Sue Carlisle, who you'll see to his left. please attend our annual gala and give the keynote address. So never do you want to say, oh, I just wanted to share some information with you, because that will cause nothing but frustration for an elected official. Have an ask, something that you want them to do. Also spell their names right. I know this, you're going to say, wait a minute, this is graduate level, faculty, staff level discussion. Why are we talking about spellings? I cannot tell you the number of times I have seen these members' names spelled wrong, and it frustrates them to death. And it hurts your credibility, because these are important people. They kind of have big egos, and they feel like if you can't be bothered to even spell their name right, and their names get spelled wrong all the time, why should they be bothered to help you? Would I do this in a seminar room? I ask people to guess, but because we're virtual here, we'll just go through this quickly. Dianne Feinstein has 2 N's. People mess it up all the time. Gavin Newsom does not have an E on the end. Assembly member David Chu, he's now our city attorney. Actually, I need to update this slide. He spells it with an I. And get their titles right too. I used to work for Phil Ting, a member of the state assembly, and people would address letters to him all the time. Dear Congressman Phil Ting. He's not a member of Congress, he's a member of the assembly. There's no excuse to ever get any of this wrong. They all have websites where you can get the title and the spelling of their names accurate. So preserve your credibility and the credibility of our institution. Double check, spell their names right. So after you're done meeting with an elected official, they're going to ask you, can you send me something in writing? Remember, they've got 10 meetings before yours, 5 meetings after yours, and at the end of the day, they're not going to remember all the details of what you discussed. You always, always, always want to walk into a meeting with a 1-pager that has a clear ask. What is it there that you want them to do? What is the problem you were asking them to solve? You summarize a few key relevant facts, no jargon, no discussion of PIs, because they won't know what that means. And you want to break up your text with big blocks with like headings and bullets so that you make it easy to scan. You don't need to have footnotes. This is not an academic research paper. They won't read it. Proofread, proofread, proofread. This is always fun when I do this in a big lecture hall. I ask people to look at what's bolded and see if you can find my typo. Spell check will not catch my typo in the bolded words. Those are actual words. And as a graduate of the Goldman School of Public Policy and friends of mine that took courses in public health, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen those words misspelled. The background of your organization and your contact information. This 1 page is not all the information that you would like to share, but it is all that they have time to read. So make it simple, easy to scan, easy to absorb. If they want to know more, they'll ask you. And that's why your contact information is at the bottom. Always have something in writing at the end. So now you have your 1-pager, and you have a clear ask and a clear problem that you want to solve. Let's talk about some tools you can use to actually interact with elected officials, get their attention, and start to get some movement on this issue that you care about. Your 1-pager can turn into a script for phone calls, for letters, or for petitions. You can design any of those things, and you'll probably have volunteers helping you make phone calls or send letters. Have a script to help everybody stay on message. Make a clear ask, be brief. And you always want to thank the legislator or staff for their time or their consideration, whether you're sending them an email or a letter or calling people on the phone. You're going to end up talking to staff more than you're going to end up talking to electeds. Always be polite, thank them for your time. And most importantly, call and write legislators that represent your district where you live, not other districts. So look at the map at the bottom of this page. The left-hand side is the western half of San Francisco. It's yellow. On the right-hand side, the purple is a different district. These are the 2 assembly districts in San Francisco. The yellow on the left is Assembly Member Phil Ting. If you live on the right, in the purple area of San Francisco, you are represented by our newest assembly member, Matt Haney, who was just elected, promoted from Board of Supervisors. I live in the purple, I live in North Beach. If I want to lobby the state legislature on state legislation, I am going to send a letter to Matt Haney because he represents me. If I send a letter to Phil Ting, because I'm like, oh, you know, I want him to know too, the first thing his staff is going to do is open the letter, look at where I live, look up whether it's in the district and say, oh, not a constituent. And they will literally walk the letter down the hall of the Matt Haney's office and give it to him and say, this is one of your constituents. They won't answer it. Phil Ting was elected to do the will of the voters in his district who elected him. He was not elected to do the will of other voters who live in other districts. So don't waste your time and the time of an elected by contacting someone who doesn't represent where you live. Some other advocacy tools that UCSF faculty and staff use a lot: an op-ed. Instead of meeting directly with an assembly member or a member of the Board of Supervisors or a member of Congress, you know that they read the newspaper. You can write an op-ed, which is an opinion piece that can go in the newspaper about a policy issue that's important to you. It's an opportunity for you to tell your unique story and share your expertise on a policy issue that you work on at UCSF. You can state relevant facts and make a clear ask. You please either support or oppose a proposed law or policy, and of course, no scientific or medical jargon. So on the right is an actual op-ed from the San Francisco Chronicle by Dr. Daniel Grossman. He's at the Bixby Center, which does OBGYN research and advocacy. They do especially around abortion care. He wrote an op-ed in the Chronicle called "California Public Universities Should Make the Abortion Pill Available to Students." This was about legislation pending in the state legislature that requires all UCs and I believe CSUs to offer the abortion by medication pill at the Student Health Center on campus. University of California did not take a position on that. We'll talk about that nuance in a minute. But Dr. Grossman is a clinician, and all of you as individual clinicians or staff members have every right, academic freedom, and free speech to make your individual case about why you think there should be a specific law or policy passed. And Dr. Grossman is eminently qualified to speak on this topic. He's an OBGYN at UCSF. And make clear who you represent. Are you speaking on behalf of the university, or are you speaking on just behalf of yourself as a clinician? In this case, because the University of California had not taken a position on this bill, Dr. Grossman could not say, University of California supports this bill, nor could he say UCSF supports this bill, because only President Drake makes policy positions on state legislation for the whole university. But he could speak on his own behalf as a clinician, and that's what he did. So can I use my UCSF title when in my private capacity I'm endorsing legislation or a ballot initiative or something? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. You can express views on your own behalf anytime you want, but not on behalf of UCSF unless you've coordinated that with my office. Community and Government Relations coordinates what the university's position is going to be. And we make sure that the chancellor is the one who is signing off on what the university position is. The higher up you go in the university, the better idea it is for you to perhaps consider putting an asterisk and says this is for identification purposes only, in case you are high enough in a university that somebody might be confused about if you're speaking for yourself or UCSF. If Chancellor Haga does an op-ed, he is so closely tied to UCSF, it's really hard to separate him. But regular faculty, absolutely not a problem. You're speaking on your own behalf. So a couple other advocacy tools. Let's go and have a meeting with an elected official. You want to start by researching the person that you are meeting with. What is their role? Who are their constituents? And what committees do they sit on? And what do those committees oversee? When are they up for re-election? And what legislation or other actions have they taken on this issue in the past? If you're going to lobby a legislator on an issue, you do not want to walk into that office and have them say, you know, I've been working on that issue for 5 years. And you go, oh, really? I had no idea. You don't want to do that. So do your research. So in the top picture, this is from my cover slide. These are students from UCSF School of Medicine Prime Program, and they're meeting with Assembly Member Jose Medina in the top picture. He is a member of the Assembly Budget Committee, and specifically the subcommittee on higher education. This is the subcommittee that considers the UC budget. So they are there to lobby him for more funding for the Prime program so we can train more primary care physicians to work in underserved communities. He also represents Riverside and the UC Riverside campus, so perfect person for us to advocate to. And then down below, the Prime students are meeting with Senator Melissa Hurtado. She represents Fresno, where UCSF, as you guys all know, also has a campus that serves Prime students and residents. When you meet with an elected official or a high-ranking staff member, you want to bring the right advocates, articulate speakers, people who are directly affected by this issue, subject matter experts, prepare who's going to say what, tell stories, use examples from your work. And number one piece of advice always, although I buried in here, but this is probably the key thing, you always want to tell a story whenever you can. And wow, as UCSF clinicians, researchers, we have great stories to tell about our patients and about our research. So in this picture, the woman on the far right is Londa Ajose. She, at the time, was Governor Newsom's higher education advisor, and we were there to lobby her to get the governor's support for more funding for Prime. So next to her, Lee Kimberg is the faculty advisor for Prime, and then we have several Prime students in their white coats around the table. So my job is just to set the table and kick off the meeting, turn it over to Lee to say a few words about Prime, but then the rest of the meeting is hearing from the students, because that's who everybody wants to hear from. And there's nothing more powerful than a Prime student saying, I'm from an immigrant family. My parents speak a language other than English. I grew up translating for them in the doctor's office and saw how that contributed to them getting substandard medical care. I am becoming a doctor and choosing Prime so that I can return to the community where I grew up and provide culturally competent, language appropriate care to my community. There need to be more doctors like me to reduce health disparities in California. And that's why we're asking you to increase funding for the Prime program to help more doctors like me serve our communities. Nothing more powerful than that. Okay. And of course, leave behind your one pager, get staff business cards, and email them afterwards to say thank you, and maybe email them the one pager so that you know that they have it. A few other advocacy tools that we encourage people to take advantage of, and then we'll take a break here in just a minute. Legislative hearings. Part of my job is to put UCSF staff and faculty in front of the state legislature, the Board of Supervisors, Congress, and scientific bodies to share our expertise. So we often provide expert testimony during a main hearing, or if we're not invited to give regular testimony during a hearing, we can sometimes organize members of our staff, faculty, or students to give public comment at the end of an item. In California, we are blessed with a state law called the Brown Act that is all about transparency and how government business is conducted. One of the requirements of the Brown Act is that before an elected body votes on any issue, they have to allow the public to give comments. Sometimes it's 1 minute, sometimes it's 3 minutes, but members of the public get to say what they want to say about that item before you vote on it. So staff, faculty, students can go down to the Board of Supervisors and give public comment on an issue. And down below, there's Dr. Fufumi Mitsuishi from UCSF Citywide Case Management Program giving comment at the Board of Supervisors on outpatient mental health treatment. And lastly, town halls. Elected officials come to their district a couple times a year. It's open to the public. They generally send invitations broadly. Here's Phil Ting speaking at a town hall in Daly City. He represents the whole west side of San Francisco, as you remember, plus Daly City. He will give a few remarks, and then people can come up to the microphone and make comments and ask him questions. So if you want to lobby Phil Ting for a piece of health policy, go to his town hall, bring some fellow faculty, some staff, from students. Take your turn to ask a question, be polite, respectful, get the staff business cards so you can follow up with them afterwards. Oh, one more, sorry, this is the last one before the break. Sometimes University of California is not going to take a position on a bill. It could be the best idea in the world, but the university tries to limit its endorsements of legislation, usually to things that directly impact the university. And the idea is that if we endorse everything, then our endorsement means nothing, because UC endorses everything. So we try to be really selective about what we endorse. And if there's a great issue where maybe UC is not taking a position, your professional association might. So here are some of the obvious ones: the Nurses Association, California Dental Association, CMA, the Pharmacists Association. There's many others that you no doubt work with. What is your professional association working on? Have they scheduled a lobby day in Sacramento or in Washington, D.C.? Do you want to join? And you can go and multiply your voice. And that way, when you walk into a legislator's office, you can be there with your California Medical Association hat on. Yes, you work at UCSF. It's fine to say that, but you're just clear. I'm here on behalf of the California Medical Association, and we want you to, support Assembly Bill 1234. So let's take a break right there. I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to talk next about advocacy and then about elections. And the elections part is really fun because there'll be a quiz. But let me pause and see if there's any questions so far.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. That was incredible. I see one question in the Q&A, which I'll ask, and I'll ask a couple other questions myself, and just encourage people to put your questions in the Q&A if you have any. So first question is the correct title for an elected official their current position or the highest position that they've ever held?
Really good question. Definitely their current position, if they're currently in it. But then once they have retired, It's generally the highest position that they have held. So people often refer to Hillary Clinton as Secretary Clinton. She was a senator, but her last and most highest position was Secretary of State. So if you run into her, it's Secretary Clinton. But otherwise, it's the position that they're currently holding.
Great. And one question I had was, you mentioned at the beginning around obviously contacting you if we're meeting with elected officials and want to bring in the UCSF name, but if it's, more on our own behalf, we don't necessarily need to do that. If we're going to, for example, professional society days or working with a community-based organization that's wanting to meet with elected officials and bring us along, is that something where we should give you a heads up about that as well?
I think it's always helpful, particularly because my office may already also be doing work with that organization. And so it's just good, we can kind of support each other and collaborate. Generally what would happen though is you say, hey, heads up, I'm going to go do the lobby day with whatever organization and I'm there on behalf of that organization. That's just helpful for me to know, either because we're collaborating or I may get a call later from particular assembly member and they'll say, hey, Dr. Beth Griffiths was in my office. And I'll say, oh, I didn't know that. It's always better to say, oh yeah, I understand she was there with CMA. That's great. So just, give me a heads up. It's always helpful. You're not required to, but it allows me to support you. If you want to be there on UCSF business though, it's absolutely essential to coordinate with my office to make sure that, you are advancing a message that is consistent with university policy. And also, I will probably be able to give you some insight about some of those electeds and how to advocate with them successfully.
Yeah, wonderful. One other question I had is, you mentioned obviously, if you're in Matt Haney's district, you want to contact Matt Haney. One thing that I noticed coming up is also that we tend to, San Francisco, we tend to be a fairly politically homogenous relative to the rest of the state and the rest of the country. And so sometimes if we're wanting to go meet with people that represent us, oftentimes they're sort of saying, yeah, I've been a co-sponsor of SB 57 for a long time. I'm totally on your same page. How best do you handle meetings like that, where you're sort of already knowing that they may be supportive of some of the issues that you care about? You may have an ask for them in addition, but they may sort of relatively quickly be on the same page as you and sort of what you recommend.
Great question. I think that in those situations, it's always helpful then to ask the elected official, what can I do to help you build support for this bill? Are there other organizations that you think I could meet with to help build the coalition of support for this bill? Is there information that I could give to you, Assemblywoman, that you would like to share with other members? Here's my one pager. Perhaps you'd like to share that with other members. Perhaps my coalition, my professional organization could do some meetings with other members. Because then if you're advocating on behalf of CMA, for example, CMA can meet with all 120 members of the legislature. That's great. So that's why being part of a coalition is powerful. It gives you more members to meet with, as opposed to on your own. Well, no one wants to hear from you except your own member. So asking that member, how can I support you in generating more support for this bill? They love to be asked for advice, and they'll generally have good advice to share.
Yeah, wonderful. I think maybe I'll pause there in terms of, looks like, sorry, one more question in the chat. If we want to share with the policy or research we've produced on a policy for which UCSF does not have a stance, for example, safety net policies, what support can your office provide?
Oh, great question. So, and I've had the Lee Institute, faculty from the Lee Institute contact me about maybe a great research paper or policy paper that they have written that has important findings and recommendations for the state legislature. I am very, very happy to take UCSF research and identify legislators who are working on that issue and put your research in front of them. They may have a bill, or in fact, you may even be aware of a bill that they're pushing that you would like your research to help inform. But if you're not sure, I can help you identify a legislator who is maybe working on that issue or a related issue. And then I'm happy to put your research in front of them and say, dear Assemblywoman, I'm happy to introduce you to Dr. Beth Griffiths. Her research on topic ABC, I think might inform the legislation that you're introducing on that issue. Please take a look at her research and let us know if you would like to collaborate with her, and I'm happy to put you in touch. And legislators love that, and they're generally happy to follow up. So please contact me, and I'm happy to help you strategize around that. And in fact, our office would like to be a lot more proactive with the legislature in providing our research, as opposed to being reactive and waiting for them to ask us. I field requests like that all the time. We would like to share your research, so don't hesitate to reach out to me, and my contact information is at the end of this presentation, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Wonderful. One follow-up question to that, just does your office help to produce the research brief, or if not, can you review one that we've put?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to review it. Absolutely. And I do that all the time. I'm happy to review a research brief. I am happy to help draft the one pager. I am happy to help you draft and review your testimony. You might be invited to talk about your research at a committee hearing, which is a very friendly environment. It's not like an academic center where your fellow researchers are going to rip you to shreds. It's very much, thank you. Oh my gosh, UCSF has great policy to offer. I will help you write your testimony and scrub it of jargon and make sure that it's high level and understandable by the lay people in the legislature who don't have a scientific background but are very eager to learn from you. So absolutely. I won't produce the work for you. I'm not the researcher, but I will happily translate it and make it digestible and powerful for advocacy.
Wonderful.
Great. All right. So let's jump back in then, and let's talk a bit about how to advocate with UCSF for things that are already kind of in the can, and you can join us and help advocate for it. And then we'll talk about elections, which is super fun. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. So let's talk about advocating with UCSF. There is an organization that we manage out of my office called UCSF Advocates, and it's a community of, at this point, about 1,600 students, staff, faculty, alumni, and other supporters who want to advocate for policy issues, for health policy. We help mobilize you to stand up, to shape local, state, and federal policies, and all to advance our mission: healthcare, research, education, and community. And we do things like this. We advocate in the state capitol for funding for Prime. I talked about that earlier. On the federal level, for more funding for NIH, which is kind of the mother's milk that funds a lot of what we do at this university. We organize people to participate in activities like the March for Science. Before COVID, we organized phone banks in support of direct action on childhood arrivals. These are the dreamers, undocumented students who the Trump administration wanted to kick out of the country. Some of them are our students, and we organized a phone bank in support of federal legislation to protect those students, as well as CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Program. And in the bottom left is one of our docs who came on our lunch break to our phone bank at Genentech Hall. We helped her identify who her member of Congress was in the East Bay and gave her a script to make a phone call. And then she got a sandwich from us on her way back to work. Public comments for the Department of Homeland Security on public charge. Some of you may be familiar with this federal issue that the Trump administration tried to pass that said that if you are an immigrant who is currently using public benefits like Medicaid or food stamps, it's going to make it harder for you to become a citizen. And as a result, patients were not coming to the hospital because they were afraid it would hurt their application for citizenship. And we were very opposed to this and organized letters and petitions in opposition. We also organize receptions for elected officials. We organize tours, and UCSF advocates are invited to all of those things. We do postcard campaigns. We make it very simple for you to, for example, on the bottom right, fill out your name, address, and email. And based on that, we will identify who your elected officials are and generate a script or a pre-printed email on a particular policy issue that you can then edit and click a button to send it into an elected official. So we make it really simple. This is an example: name, address, phone, email, and then down below is a pre-generated email about Prime that will get sent to an elected official on your behalf with your name and address saying, please vote for more money for Prime. And it will be targeted at the elected official where you live because you've given us your address. So to sign up, I encourage all of you to do that right now. You can do it on your phone. If you pull out your cell phone right now and text UCSF to the number 52886, you will automatically be enrolled in UCSF. Well, you'll get a push notification to enroll in UCSF Advocates. And then what it means is you will get like a push text from us probably once a month saying, hey, click here to encourage your state legislator to support the UC budget, or click here to urge your member of Congress to support more funding for NIH. We don't sell or share your information. It's just to engage you on advocacy campaigns that we already have going, and you get to choose whether that's an issue you want to engage in or not. You are not put in as an advocate for something against your will. You were always given the option to choose to plug in. So that's a little bit about UCSF advocates. A few other things about our Office of Community and Government Relations. Again, we are here to collaborate with you and promote your work to elected officials. We work very closely with UCSF's communications team. We can help direct you to them for a press release or a social media push, or to get an event that you are hosting in the .edu calendar, or get your research maybe put in an internal communications like the Pulse newsletter or Provost Dan Lowenstein's Espresso newsletter. We also help with community relations and, of course, everything I've been talking about with government relations. So we're really here to support and promote and get visibility for what you do to help advance good public policy. So quick stop, questions about advocacy or UCSF advocacy before our last and most fun section about elections.
I don't see any other questions in the chat. Feel free to put questions if they're in the chat, and then maybe I'll save the rest of my questions for the end.
We'll save till the end. All right, let's talk about elections. And this is the most fun part of this presentation. This part has a quiz at the end. And so because we're an academic institution, that's an essential part of this presentation. So get ready for the quiz. It is election season right now. It's an even numbered year, which means that all the members of the State Assembly and State Senate are up for election. Every member of the Board of Supervisors in an even numbered district is up for election. Matt Haney, newly elected to the Assembly, has to run in the primary in June. We're voting on recalling the district attorney if you live in San Francisco in June, as well as I think 6 different ballot initiatives. And then, of course, this fall, every member of Congress is up. It's midterms. There's a lot going on. And if you're in this presentation, I presume you care about elections and you're probably a voter. So let's talk about how to engage and how to do it the right way so that you can be a good citizen in our democracy, but not get in trouble with UCSF. All right. So rules of the road for elections. The thing to remember about UCSF is that we are both a 501c3 charity and a state agency. And this is what that means. As a charity, UCSF as an institution cannot endorse or oppose or contribute to candidates. So we cannot be involved in Mayor Breed's re-election campaign. That's illegal because we're a 501c3 charity. We are also a state agency. We are an arm of the state of California. And as such, we cannot advocate for local or state ballot initiatives. So for example, the recall of Chesapeake, that's Proposition H on the ballot. We cannot take a position on that. Even if it's a hospital bond, we cannot take a position on that. No, nothing on the ballot can UCSF take a formal position. However, we can do nonpartisan activities like hosting debates or voter registration drives. That's just fine. Yesterday, we partnered, my office partnered with the League of Women Voters, and we did a nonpartisan forum where we walked through every single measure on the San Francisco ballot, just to inform people. But we didn't tell people how to vote because that would be a no-no. So to be really explicit so that you don't get in trouble, you can't endorse a candidate or a ballot measure on behalf of UCSF or any UCSF organization. That one's on the quiz. So remember that one. You can't distribute information in support of candidates or ballot measures. So like you can't leaflet on campus, recall Chesapeake, you can't do that. You cannot display campaign posters or banners or literature on campus. You cannot link to a campaign website from like your UCSF Philip Lee Institute webpage or your Lee Institute social media. You cannot link to any campaign sites. And you can't use any UCSF resources for partisan political activities. That means your email, your social media, your copy machine, your letterhead, classrooms. Can't use that. Cannot use your UCSF paid time. If you're supposed to be at work, you're not supposed to be out campaigning for somebody. Just take a day off, do it on your own time. Now you can on campus conduct a genuine curricular activity to educate students about an election issue, provide fair presentation of the facts, use objective language, avoid urging a vote for or against a candidate. You can say who the candidates are, but you can't tell people how to vote, okay? Nonpartisan voter registration drive on campus. My office coordinates that with student services every year. We do a cinnamon rolls at the polls event, which I love. If you show up in front of Millbury Union or in front of Genentech Hall showing your I voted sticker, we give you a donut or a cinnamon roll to say thank you for voting. And you can host a neutral public forum and invite all candidates. My office will likely be hosting a candidates forum for the new D6 supervisor, because District 6, where Matt Haney used to be supervisor, there will be an open race for that this fall. All right, off campus on your own time, you can absolutely do campaigning for candidates. You can donate to political candidates with your own money, not your department money. You can write an op-ed in your personal capacity, endorsing a ballot initiative. I, as a clinician, think it's important to support Proposition A, and here's why. But I'm speaking on my own behalf, not on behalf of the university. You can totally go walk precincts for a candidate and give them money, but on your own time with your own resources, and maybe don't wear your UCSF branded fleece. Just keep UCSF out of it. Avoid any confusion over your UCSF versus private political roles. Now, while Matt Haney was running for assembly back in March, some of you, if you watch TV, like during the Super Bowl, for example, may have seen commercials in favor of Matt Haney with people who were wearing UCSF branded fleeces and coats and jackets. And they were saying things like, I'm going to vote for Matt Haney because he's going to support my job. And I got a mass of phone calls from people saying, what in the world is UCSF doing? You can't endorse Matt Haney. That's illegal. And they were right. UCSF did not make those commercials. I called Matt Haney's campaign and said, what in the world are you doing? And they said, we didn't make those commercials. And it turns out who made the commercials was one of our many labor partners, a labor union who had endorsed Matt Haney, and some of our employees are members of that union. So we ended up reaching out to the union and saying, hey, look, you can do an independent expenditure in support of the candidate. Please don't wear UCSF branded clothing in the ad because it implies a UCSF endorsement, and that's illegal. Okay, well, so what are the consequences? So what? Like, why does this even matter? Well, one consequence is revocation of UCSF's tax exempt status, because you cannot use taxpayer money for political campaigns. Criminal and civil penalties for misuse of state resources, like your state, your department budget. You cannot use that for an event to support a candidate. You may need to personally reimburse the university for improper use of funds. But the most common one is just that you're going to discredit our research. When I take UCSF faculty and staff to Sacramento, we're hugely respected because we are considered non-partisan, non-political. We're just smart, the best research, you can trust us. You never want people to think, oh, you can't trust UCSF. They're just a bunch of lefties from San Francisco. They're just, they're not objective. That would be the worst possible outcome, to discredit our research and hurt our ability to inform public policy and hurt our reputation. Who's going to catch you? Everybody. Everybody's watching. The Fair Political Practices Commission, the Attorney General, Secretary of State, the IRS, they're looking out for our tax exempt status. Reporters, the Chronicle would love to tell a story about some UCSF faculty member giving UCSF money to a candidate. And the public, which is why when I'm out supporting candidates, I do not wear UCSF branded anything. All right, so let's wrap this up with a fun quiz, because I know we're almost out of time. And this quiz is called, Can UCSF Do That? So case study number 1, the Asian Pacific American Medical Student Association is planning an event this Friday titled Local Advocacy Meeting for Prop C. And at the event, a local organizer from the Coalition on Homelessness will speak to students about Prop C, which is from 2018, a bold initiative aimed at ameliorating homelessness in San Francisco, hoping to inform students about local opportunities to get involved. And the question for you is, can the Office of Student Academic Affairs, the Academic Affairs Office is asking you, can UCSF host this event on campus? And in the large lecture hall, I would be asking for hands up. But because we're virtual today, I'll give you a sec to think about it. Is this okay to host basically a yes on Prop C meeting? And if you're looking at this carefully and you have seen that this is only one side of the issue, you would say no. It's not okay for us to host this on campus. I made the organizers unhappy and told them they couldn't do this because they'd be using a university resource, a classroom, for a partisan political activity, which is yes on Prop C. And the way for them to make it better would be to either take it off campus or just invite everybody. Invite the yes on C, invite the no on C, invite everybody, and then it's nonpartisan and everyone can just hear all sides of the issue. Then you can use a UCSF classroom. This one is fun. Here is a tweet from Mark Benioff. from 2018. It says California's 13 children's hospitals like UCSF and Oakland handle more than 1 million patient visits annually, regardless of a family's ability to pay. Prop 4 provides $1.5 billion over 15 years for life-saving care for California kids. I mean, who could be opposed to that, right? Vote yes on Prop 4. So the question is, who can tweet this? Can Mark Benioff tweet this? Is Mark Benioff a UCSF employee? No, he is not. We don't pay him. He gives us a lot of money. That's why his name's on the hospital. He can tweet whatever he wants. But here's where it gets tricky. Up above Mark Benioff's name, you see UCSF Children's Hospital Oakland retweeted. Can UCSF Benioff Children's Oakland retweet this? No, they cannot. You cannot use UCSF social media to support a political campaign. And you might think, well, it's money for children's hospitals. Who would oppose that? Not the point. Everybody loves children's hospitals. This passed. It got money for us. We love it. But because we're a state agency, we cannot endorse ballot initiatives. It's illegal. Neither can UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital San Francisco. But can you do it on your personal Twitter campaign? Not your UCSF Philip Lee Institute Twitter, but your personal Twitter. Absolutely, yes, you can. All right, another one quickly. This is a flyer that ended up in my mailbox for Prop C. This is the homeless one, again, more money, tax initiative to raise money for homeless services. And here's a doctor in her white coat and stethoscope, and she says mental health services are absolutely critical to addressing the homeless crisis, and that's why I'm voting yes on Prop C. Dr. Colette Auserwald, MD. So this arrived in my mailbox, and I immediately asked myself, well, who does Dr. Auserwald work for? Is she one of ours? I don't know. Can you tell by looking at this flyer who she works for? And it's probably not an accident that the Yes on Prop C logo is strategically covering her name on her white coat and her affiliation. And I looked her up in our UCSF directory, and yes, of course, she is one of ours. I think she has a joint appointment at Berkeley as well, but she's in pediatrics. Can she appear in this political ad supporting Prop C if she's a UCSF faculty member? The answer is yes, she can, because nowhere in this ad does it say UCSF. She is in here as a clinician in her own time, her own individual capacity, and UCSF is not mentioned. So yes, it's just fine. So lastly, different Prop C from 2019. This is the last one. This one is about Juul. Juul, as you remember, is the vaping company. And they had been hurt by legislation passed at the Board of Supervisors that says no vaping products can be sold in San Francisco. The board passed that law. Juul said, well, we don't like that. That's bad for us. We want to overturn it. So yes on Prop C means yes, you should be able to sell vaping products in San Francisco. And no on Prop C says no, you should not be able to sell vaping products in San Francisco and let the Board of Supervisors law stand. So the no on C has been endorsed by the who's who of health organizations. You have the Academy of Pediatrics, the Cancer Society, the Heart Association, the Lung Association, Kaiser Permanente, the Medical Society, on. And on the right-hand side, every elected under the sun, Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, Lieutenant Governor, every member of the Board of Supervisor, every single person in the world who cares about healthcare is on board with the No on C campaign, right? Including, and I highlighted, the Tobacco Awareness Project at the UCSF School of Pharmacy. And the question is it okay for the Tobacco Awareness Project at the UCSF School of Pharmacy to endorse the No on Prop C campaign? And the answer is nope, absolutely not. This arrived in the mail. I immediately called the consultant for the No on C campaign. I see this is on your website and it's on your mailer. You need to take it off your website right now and call me when it's done, because that's illegal. And the next time that you put a mailer out, you need to take that off. UCSF cannot endorse ballot campaigns. To this day, I'm not entirely sure how it got on there, but I think that an enthusiastic volunteer for the campaign associated with our School of Pharmacy said, sure, we'll endorse that, and was well-intentioned, but didn't realize that that was a big no-no. So That is the end of the presentation. This is my contact information. I'm in the directory. You can find me by email and by phone. I am always, always, always delighted to talk to faculty, staff, students about elections, about legislation, about invitations to elected officials to come to campus, and excited to support all of you in your work. So in the 5 minutes we have left, Beth, let me know if there's any questions.
Yeah, wonderful. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. So first question is, if our Twitter profile mentions we're at UCSF, is there standard language to indicate that we are not speaking on behalf of the university?
Yes, people say opinions are my own.
Great, great. And one question I have was around the example you gave of an event where, it's okay if you invite both sides or you invite all the candidates. What happens if you invite them and they can't all come? Is that okay to then just have the people that can show up, or how would you?
Really good question. And this has happened. So if it's an election forum, you need to allow them to send a surrogate. This is really important. And this happened in the debate for the district attorney back in 2018. And I think actually the Lee Institute was one of the hosts of this debate. All of the candidates for district attorney could come except initially Susie Loftus. And they said, well, we'll send a surrogate. And there was a little bit of debate among the organizers, like, well, should we allow them to send a surrogate? Always, always, always allow them to send a surrogate. Hugely important, because if you say no, then we're not hearing from all sides. And we are responsible for an unfair debate. Whereas if we allow them to send a surrogate, then it's on the campaign that, the candidate looks bad because they didn't come in person. That's on them. But we said, yep, we invited everybody, and sending a surrogate is fine. If it's for a ballot initiative, as long as you invite everybody, and you just state publicly, hey, we invited everybody, and unfortunately the other side didn't come, then you're fine. But just make sure you make a good faith effort. You don't need to shut down the event if the other side can't make it.
Yeah, wonderful. And can you speak at all to the difference? Many of us work either clinically or research-wise at the VA or the general in addition to UCSF. And I don't know if there's anything special that we should know about that.
Sure. Yeah, you're exactly right. At the general, we are the faculty. At the VA, we are the faculty. And so as a courtesy, I always try to coordinate with, we'll say the general, because I'm at the general a lot. I'm always careful to coordinate with DPH, any activities we're doing on campus. So one of the things that I do often is when there's a new elected official, I will take them on a tour of the general. And it is a UCSF-led tour of UCSF programs at the general. And it's led by our vice dean, who was Susan Ehrlich, was Sue Carlisle, but now is Elena Fuentes-Affleck. But I always make sure to tell Susan Ehrlich, the CEO of the hospital, hey, I'm bringing an elected official. I'm going to do a tour. Susan, would you like to come and give a welcome on behalf of DPH? And so just communicate with people and let them know what you're doing.
Great. Any other last questions? Feel free to enter them in the Q&A. Otherwise, I think that is most of my questions.
Yeah, Beth, I have
Yeah,
one.
go ahead.
Yes, and I mean, this goes back a little bit, and that is advice that you have when an elected official or member of their staff reaches out to a faculty member and says, hey, I'd like to talk to you. And now sometimes it's just generally, I'd like to talk to you. Sometimes it's very clear that they want to engage you related to one of their legislative agendas.
Really good question. And sometimes they'll want to engage you to attend a political event like a press conference. I get that too. So it's a good thing when a legislator or their staff reach out to you. It's an opportunity for you to share your research and expertise. My request is that you respond to them and that you CC me and say, hey, I'm CCing Ami Alden, Director of Local and State Government Relations for Awareness, because then that way I can support you and can say, oh, hey, this is Assemblymember Phil Ting. He's also interested in XYZ. You may want to share that other research. Or I may be able to tell you, oh, okay, so this event, what this actually is a member of the Board of Supervisors going after the mayor. And they say that they want to engage you to talk about their research. But what's actually happening is that this press conference is a way for these elected officials to beat up on the mayor because they don't like what she's doing in the Tenderloin and they don't like the increased police presence. And we should not be present at any press conference that's going after an elected official. So please stand down and don't participate. And I've had that conversation with members of our faculty. Having a good partnership with the mayor's office and city elected officials, hugely important in order for us to be effective. And so we always want to share our research, and we don't want to get snared into other people's political agendas that may end up hurting the university. So part of my job is to help you avoid that.
Thanks, Ami. Very helpful.
Great.
Well, thank you. This was wonderful. I know answered a lot of my questions, and I imagine a lot of questions from other folks. And just want to thank you again for your offer to partner even further, and really appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I am so happy to work with all of you. Never hesitate to reach out to me with questions over email or phone. My job is to support all of you, and I thank you for all the work that you do at the Institute. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Thank
Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.